For over 10 years, gun manufacturers enjoyed a pool of profits with a federal law that prevented survivors of gun violence from holding gun makers responsible. But that looks to be changing now. Last month, the Supreme Court allowed a major case against the industry to go forward that was filed by family members of victims from the Sandy Hook shooting. Joining us now to discuss this is legal journalist Molly Barrios. So Molly, first off, what is this case? What's happening right now?
So it's interesting. As you said, the gun industry has felt pretty immune from lawsuits like the one that's being petitioned in this case for years, at least since 2005 when that federal law was passed. But this particular case is called Soto versus Bushmaster Firearms International, which is essentially Remington. That's their parent company. And it's family members of some of those people that were killed in Sandy Hook. You remember the kindergartners and the teachers that were killed when the kid walked in with the AR-15 and basically opened fire. And they're saying that Bushmaster/Remington illegally marketed these weapons in a military, for use in a military style way, basically military style mission, and that this shooting was the result of that. And traditionally lawsuits like this have not been able to move forward because of that 2005 law that was passed, the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, and we can get into that a little bit. But the gun industry said, hey, we want to strike this complaint. This case shouldn't be allowed to move forward because of this federal law that basically supersedes their complaint. And the the state Supreme Court in Connecticut said, oh, wait 1 second. We are going to allow this to move forward because these people are bringing their case forward on grounds that you illegally marketed it, and it's not just targeting gun regulation. So that particular federal law really hammers down on individual states that are trying to pass laws that hamper who can own a gun, who can possess a gun. And that's not the angle that they were taking with this case. So basically they said this is more than just about targeting laws that affect gun regulations. This is a bigger issue in how you marketed it. So we're going to allow this case to proceed. And of course, they went to the U.S. Supreme Court as well. And the U.S. Supreme Court was like, let's let it move forward. See what happens.
So the law itself, the one that says you cannot sue the gun manufacturers, it is limited in what it actually says. It's basically saying, like, look, just because somebody goes in and commits a mass shooting, you can't sue the person or the maker of that gun. But then you get into the kind of muddy area. You start looking at, well, gun violence is a national health epidemic, just like tobacco was in the 90s. That's kind of how they're looking at this now. And they're starting to say, well, okay, I can't sue you just because your weapon was used in this. But once we start looking at your practices and the overall impact, that's where this law, oops, we didn't cover that. You guys are in trouble now, right?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And this particular case is going to give, folks that have been opposed to gun rights advocates, and really not so much your average person that's just supporting, their Second Amendment rights. They're really talking about the industry in general, which has been manipulating laws in order to protect their profits. So this case involving the Sandy Hook victims that Connecticut is allowed to move forward is going to give a jury a chance to hear about some of those practices, to get that information, to see the bigger picture. And I think that's why you're going to have so many state attorneys general watching this to see how it comes out. You may see other lawsuits, of course, that follow. But going back to your point on the 2005 law, the PLCAA, that was passed in 2005 by the U.S. Supreme Court. Mostly the one who wrote the majority of the opinion was Justice Scalia, and he took a lot of criticism for it because at issue was the Second Amendment, and it wasn't just applying to the right to a militia to bear arms against any opposing government or corrupt government, that it focused more on an individual's rights. And it's a number of states that use this particular logic, which was criticized heavily, by the way, that said, hey, you shouldn't be, yeah, that's fine, but our founding fathers were really more about protecting us from a corrupt government. We're fine that individuals feel like they can have the right to protect themselves, but this isn't just about protecting an individual's right to own a weapon. We have to look at the fuller purpose behind it. And Scalia was criticized for essentially having more political speech, political wordplay in his decision as opposed to judicial logic. So this 2005 law was a result of what you had mentioned earlier. It was the gun industry being concerned that they were going to see the same fate as what you saw with big tobacco in individual states. Fred Levin of our own Levin Papantonio spearheading that effort right here in Florida, which started a wave of lawsuits of states saying, hey, tobacco, you're making our people sick and we want you to pay for it. And so the gun industry sees these the outcome of some of these cases, and they were like, oh boy, we got lots of people dying from our stuff too. We don't want to be personally held accountable. We don't want our manufacturers held accountable for people dying in mass numbers. And there has been a 17% increase in gun violence since that law was passed 10 years. Well, it'd be 14 years ago now.
Well, I know it is weird to think of that as, oh, it's tenured.
But
you know, when we're looking at the Heller decision, when we're looking at this particular Supreme Court case, the law passed by Congress here saying you can't sue them, all of that adds up to what we see today.
Yes,
all of the violence,
a mess.
you know. And prior to that, violence existed. It was out there. But these two things, when they came together and exploded, really, that's when we saw the numbers spike. As you just said, a 17% increase just since these two things have happened. You know, that's not an accident. That's not a coincidence.
No,
it is a
not.
direct result of these things. So,
all to protect profits for the gun industry, because
Right.
that is ultimately, you even have states attorneys general that are supportive of the gun industry writing letters about this, saying, well, you know, you're going to hurt their profits, and we certainly don't want to impact their economic activity. Well, I sure don't want to have to see parents grieving over a dying kindergartner because some lunatic managed to get his hands on an automatic or a semi-automatic weapon. Any kind of weapon that's used in these kind of cases, whatever the age of the victim, if it can be prevented, it should be prevented. This isn't about Second Amendment individuals having the right to bear arms to protect themselves in their own homes. That's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing John Smith with a handgun killing, you know, that certainly happens. But for the most part, what you're seeing, the headline making cases are the ones where it's mass killings or individual shootings by a person who had mental health problems, which is a whole other issue.
Right. And you know, just to kind of sum this up real quick, nobody out there has ever said, let's go out and let's take everybody's guns away.
That's right.
You know, but what we're saying, those of us who say things have to change, is maybe, just maybe, the same weapon that you use if you're a soldier in the trenches,
Right.
maybe the guy down the street who's paranoid of the government coming and knocking down his door and thinks there's black helicopters flying around his house, maybe that guy shouldn't have it. And just maybe if we do that, we'd all be a little bit safer. Molly Barrows, thank you very much for talking to us
Thanks so
today.
much, Farron.
This is an important message for our nation's veterans. If you served our country in the military between 2003 and 2015 and you suffered significant hearing loss, you might be entitled to compensation. Because the hearing protection you were issued may be at fault for the damage you suffered, but you need to act now. Your time to make a claim might be limited. Learn more at levinlaw.com/earplugs.